All right, where's the thing on this car? How do you put it in gear? Where's the
Right
thing?
here.
What is this? Is this a shifter car? I cannot drive a shifter car, right? So we got a little situation here. I can't drive these kind of cars. What the fuck is going on? You think that's funny? Would you like to know, smartass? Would you like to know why I can't drive this kind of car? I'll tell you why. I'm used to luxury cars. Have you ever heard of a luxury car? You know what luxury means? Have you ever heard of Cadillac? Cadillac Eldorado? That's what I drive. I drive cars that shift themselves. My cars shift themselves. The luxury cars, they shift themselves.
Vincent Gallo is an artist, actor, musician, and director. He's most famous for his two directorial features, Buffalo 66 and The Brown Bunny. Both of Gallo's films are visibly personal to him and reflect a lot of his own perspective and concepts, which are enhanced with his control of the majority of both films' production, from acting and directing to editing, production, and cinematography. Vincent Gallo's roles in both films and his history as a multi-medium artist contributes to the framework supported by the auteur theory. The concept of the auteur theory revolves around addressing the relationships between the film and the director, and how the audience can receive and analyze it through them. Although primarily the concept notes that the director is the author of the film and all of its primary themes, meaning and creativity, the idea of the author, or auteur, has become a highly marketable feature on top of released films, all the while being a dichotomy, as the concept of the auteur has its tenet in being exclusive only to the select few, which fill the required check marks. The theory is contentious not only for the fact of placing all the importance and way of analysis on a single man or woman, but due to many other elements. Nevertheless, it is clear that Gallo does place importance on his position as creator or auteur of his both films. From first viewings of both of Gallo's directorial texts and both of the film's openings, the words of Vincent Gallo covers the majority of the screen directly after the two studios take up on one introductory credit sequence. Vincent Gallo is an excellent subject to view from an auteur framework. Despite the majority of his directorial work not being available for viewing, both of his films, Buffalo 66 and The Brown Bunny, are great testaments to his authorship and will be analyzed through such a framework. Before discussing the subject of his research, the nature of the auteur, its assessment, and its historical rope fight must be talked through. The auteur theory dictates a concept where the director reigns supreme over the creative aspects and practically all of the elements, from mise en scène, blocking, narrative, and the choice of music. In this regard, the director or the auteur is held responsible for the film's outcome, its success, or its shortcomings. The development and roots of the auteur theory is often attributed to the French film critics of the magazine Cahiers du Cinéma, a handful of them which incorporated many of the concepts written about in their magazine and created the famous French New Wave. These critics drew upon John Epstein's 1921 coinage of the designation auteur to refer to a film director. The theory was written as a politique d'auteur, which was first promulgated in January 1954 in an article entitled A Certain Tendency of French Cinema. 8 years later, François Truffaut formulated the auteur theory. The French critics differentiated the auteur from a metteur en scène, which is a technical director, a great technician or translator who simply adapts a material rather than trademark it with his creative and personal touch. As much as the auteur theory has deviated into one of the most rewarding and widespread marketing strategies, Andrew Sarris noted the critic must faithfully follow each and every one of his or her films to discover thread lines in affiliated personal poetics, technical composition, photography, narrative, mise en scène, and more. The process requires a kind of profligate intemperance of viewing, in which nothing could be left out, in case that is where the key lay. The key is what Sarris calls the distinguishable personality of the director as a criterion of value. In terms of Vincent Gallo, he has only a handful of directed media. Nevertheless, the concept agrees with Gallo in his complete control of directorial features, which in turn reveal a lot of what the theory sympathizes with, such as being the criterion of value. Along these lines, the cost of the auteur can be given to directors who have not directed a large portfolio of films. For example, Jim Jarmusch, already with his second directorial debut, Stranger Than Paradise, was heralded as an auteur. Pearson notes, Jarmusch was of course a complete unknown, yet the ad campaign said, "A new American film by Jim Jarmusch." The marketing was not just fuel for how the auteur can be created with a debut feature through idiosyncrasies and technical competence on the side of the director, but also symbolic for the birth and rise of independent cinema, which fit both of Gallo's films to a T, being as he produced them himself without the consideration of profit. The French critics furthered the concept analysis of the director's language seen throughout his or her films, This language is reflected through the mise-en-scène or the specific signifying practice. This language is discovered furthermore through subtlety of frames and detecting the director's signature or camera stylo. A notion put forth by Alexander Aschrook in 1948, which states that an artist can express his thoughts, however abstract they may be, or translate his obsessions exactly as he does in a contemporary essay or novel. Gallo uses the concept of camera stylo in the same line to represent the themes of alienation in his second film, The Brown Bunny, where Clay, the main character, drives through his childhood neighborhood accompanied by Bonnie Beecher's Come Wander With Me, as well as warm lens flares. The theme of alienation with familiarity is used throughout his two films, specifically with the use of camera or camera stylo. Roy Veda, a critic and founding member of the editorial board of Cahiers du Cinéma, states in a 1960 article, "The originality of an auteur lies not in the subject matter he chooses, but in the technique he employs. In mise-en-scène, the striving towards order, harmony, composition, the placing of actors and objects, the movements within the frame, the capture of a movement or a look. In short, intellectual operation which has set to work an initial emotion and a general idea." Nevertheless, the Cahiers du Cinéma writers such as André Bazin themselves admitted that their views tended to reflect a subjective preference for one director over another, and that it was not based on any theoretically established criteria. André Bazin, the co-founder of the magazine, complained, saying that our finest writers on Cahiers have been practicing the auteur criticism for 3 or 4 years, and they have yet to produce a main corpus of its theory. Further criticism famously came from the influential French philosopher Roland Barthes and his 1997 short essay, The Death of the Author. Barthes says, "The explanation of a work is always sought in the man or woman who produced it, as if it were always in the end, through the more or less transparent allegory of the fiction, the voice of a singular person, the author confiding in us all." This criticism is completely negated if the director explains his reasons and concepts for the film he created. That is why many directors deny offering any explanations for their films. The most famous is David Lynch.
Not too much.
No, I won't explain it. But I think it's going to be a different explanation for, different people.
I know you hate saying what things mean in your films, but am I right in thinking that that's at least in the right area?
No.
Nevertheless, Gallo, unlike Lynch, is open to explaining the reasoning behind his films, probably due to critics dismantling them, especially his second feature, The Brown Bunny. Andrew Sarris is the critic who is widely perceived to be the one who brought the auteur theory into its spotlight. Shepherded a lot of the hallmarks to determine who the auteur was and how to distinct them from his contemporaries. Sarris posited 3 basic premises of the auteur theory, which can all be attributed to Gallo in his 2 directorial features. The first was that the director must be technically competent. As Sarris states, a great director has to be at least a good director. As such, he mentions that Tolstoy had to know how to use the metaphor wisely, Wagner had to know how to blend individual instruments of his orchestra, and Rembrandt had to know how to compose and combine his shots in order to express what he wishes to express.
We saw the Fellini film last Tuesday. It is not one of his best. It lacks a cohesive structure. You get the feeling that he's not absolutely sure what it is he wants to say. Of course, I've always felt he was essentially a technical filmmaker. Granted, La Strada was a great film. Great in its use of negative imagery more than anything else. But that central cohesive core, that must lead through an art.
The auteur was a director consistently expressing his own unique obsessions. The other was a competent, even highly competent filmmaker, but lacking the consistency which portrayed the profound involvement of a personality. For example, Peter Jackson, director of the Lord of the Rings series, uses his interpretation of the books to create the movie. Although he has a personal style, I don't think the movies are remembered by him being the director, but rather the plot or the story. The story was already written for him, he just interpreted it and made it visual. In contrast to Jackson's by-the-book visual translations, stands Stanley Kubrick. His filmography is largely made up of book-to-screen adaptations. In every one of these, Kubrick makes the film and the source material his own. Famously, Kubrick's magnum opus, The Shining, was adapted from Stephen King's novel and completely created something new, much to King's dismay.
Oh, the book was warm and the movie was cold. It was a Kubrick film. And don't get me wrong, I love everything else the man did. I just didn't like that one.
The second premise was that the director must have a distinguishable personality to be considered an auteur. Over a group of films, the director must exhibit certain recurring characteristics of style which serve as a signature. Sarris exemplifies this with the story of Little Red Riding Hood and what the director would be concerned in capturing. For instance, if he's concerned primarily with the emotional problems and compulsion of the wolf, or if the director wanted to capture the vestigial virginity of the little girl, and as such these would be differentiated through close-ups or long shots of the wolf or the girl. What is at stake is the two contrasting directorial attitudes towards life. Famed UK critic explains the Gallo, a supplement of this position.
Makers that have any idea of concept today.
That's right. That's
First
right.
of all, they haven't formed their ideas about life because they haven't seen
Or
too
language,
much of it.
right.
When you make movies, what do you see about life? But if you look at the great filmmakers like Antonioni, Renoir, Bergman, and so on, they have a view of life, and within a minute of their film opening, you know that you're seeing.
They have their own point of view.
They have their own point of view.
The filmmaker famously shared his position of personality when he spoke ill of Spike Jonze, a famous director.
What you have to do is you have to separate filmmaking from screenplay and performance. You have to separate filmmaking from screenplay and performance. As a filmmaker, he is nothing, a zero. He's brought nothing to the page, brought nothing to the picture. If you bring him to a party and there's 10 interesting people there, if I'm with Johnny Ramone, John Frusciante, 10 of my friends, and Spike is there, which has happened 100 times. He's the least interesting. He's the person who doesn't know anything. He's the person who doesn't say anything funny, interesting, intelligent. He has no point of view. All he does is want to find out what you think, so he's sure about what he should be doing. What do you think? What do you think? He's a pig piece of shit.
In terms of Gallo's distinguishing personality, it is visibly established not only through his various accomplishments, through painting, music, motorcycle racing, and modeling, or his ties to no wave and postmodernism through his life, which began in the culturally rich 1980s New York. All of these are part of his persona and are conditioned by Gallo's working class aesthetic. Gallo is very proud on his blue-collar capabilities.
I became the best fucking dishwasher of New York City history. The only fucking dishwasher to ever get reviewed in a magazine about food. They commented on how fucking clean the place was. That was me cleaning the place.
Furthermore, Gallo has not only created a distinguishing personality through his screen acting, other contributions to artistic mediums, but also through his plethora of sardonic, baudelairian remarks, which he makes throughout all of his public appearances.
Sophia likes any guy who has something that she wants. If she wants to be a filmmaker, she'll fuck a filmmaker. If she wants to be a photographer, she'll fuck a photographer. If she wants to be in fashion, she'll fuck somebody in fashion. She's only attracted to people who have something that she can take from them. And she's really a parasite like that, just like her fat pig father was.
Quentin Tarantino is an a-hole, you say?
Oh, he's just a real
He's a jerk?
jerk.
You've hung out with him?
No, he stopped once. He was nice. He pulled in front of my house, but he's a collage artist. I mean, he's
He's not a real director. Too much weed?
I didn't say it, right?
You made a fingertip motion like you were smoking a joint.
Day and night.
Day and night.
Really?
Day and night.
You made so many. Susan Sarandon dislikes you because you called her an old hag.
Well, first of all, she's an old hag, but that's besides the point.
She can't get upset about
besides
that,
the
can
point.
she?
Why is the maker of the Titanic, James Cameron, a pig? You've called him a pig. Why is that?
Did I call him a
yes,
pig?
Yes, you said. You once called director James Cameron
If
a
I
pig.
called him a pig, then he's a pig.
Surprisingly later, Gallo went to work with Francis Ford Coppola, the very man who he insulted in an interview.
What do you want to sing? Tut-tut-tutsie. Okay, here we go. Tut-tut-tutsie, good night. Tut-tut-tutsie. My boy.
Nevertheless, these remarks have remarkably burned a lot of bridges for him and cast a dark light on his persona.
People probably know me by now that I don't say so many nice things about people, but I guess no one likes me after they work with me, because they were mean after Buffalo 66, and I'm sure the Japanese distributors won't talk to me anymore, and no one talks to me after they work with me. And no one says nice things about me.
Oh, yeah,
Vincent Gallo.
What happened to him?
Lost his mind.
Yeah, he was crazy as it was. That's what.
Gallo's recurring trait of outspokenness and disparaging criticism of his own industry, co-stars, and anything he has an opinion about, creates media surrounding his name. As such, his presence existing in extra-textual cinematic discourses, provided through interviews and articles, creates an auteur aura around his name. His outspokenness also reveals a lot about his perspectives on life and personality, which validates Sarris' second position. The third and most controversial premise would be that the film must contain interior meaning. As Sarris notes, an interior meaning is extrapolated from the tension between the director's personality and his material. This tension is a conflict between the director and the infrastructure of a film, which aids its direction, such as screenwriting, editing, cinematography, and so on. Truffaut describes it as the temperature of the director on set. A good example of this temperature and leadership on set would be David Lynch, who has a very idiosyncratic way of directing films and his actors. Lynch would use code words with actors as well as directing them very specifically, all the while being very present on set, sitting just behind the camera.
Then you can kind of go in, and then you have the second whisper, which will be it will be the first, but now it's the second one, and you're sort of playful with that, playful, and then you get real playful, and you do playful over here, and you move your hand over to his cheek, and then this time really kiss with the lips, get a good kiss, and smiling before, a nice long kiss in the lips, and come back playful, smiling, and then you smile all the way up.
In terms of Gallo, he is widely perceived to be an exemplary candidate for his temperature on set, and creating the film meticulously through its infrastructure of production. When it comes to Gallo and his filmography, both films were written by him in conjunction with being controlled by him in many other ways, such as directing, acting, and even cinematography. Although Lance Accord is credited with doing the cinematography for his first film, Buffalo 66, Gallo had this to say about him.
Faggot cameraman, Lance Accord, who shot for 3 days, didn't even shoot the whole film. I need to be called director of photography, not cinematographer. Everybody harassing me for...
In his second feature, Brown Bunny, Gallo was much more meticulous in choosing his cast and crew.
I made this film, I decided, you want to work in my film? First of all, there's only 3 people who work in the fucking film. 3 people. You want to work in my film? You sign a piece of paper that says, if I give you a credit, it's up to me, and what it says is up to me. Otherwise, don't work in my film. You want to act in my movie? You give me your home phone number, and I'll talk to you directly. If your agent calls me in any way whatsoever, you're fired from the film.
These 3 positions are very indicative of Gallo, his work in screen acting, music, and most importantly as a director. Before relating these positions as a framework for viewing his 2 films, I must first introduce Gallo. Before creating his first film in 1998, Vincent Gallo had already made a name and a distinguishing personality for himself in many artistic circles, mainly due to his many contributions to several artistic mediums such as film, music, art, and more elements of cinema. Furthermore, what started his career was his involvement with New York's emerging cultural powerhouse in the 1980s. Vincent Gallo was born in 1961 in Buffalo, New York, son of Janet, a hairdresser, and father Vincenzo, a film musician and hairdresser. Gallo described his mother as a thief, and his father who reportedly beat him every day after being caught for a sex crime. Gallo's childhood and early experiences are very referential in both his directorial films, through the cinematic display of similar experiences and locations he was in as a child. According to his self-written biography, Gallo became known in New York City for his unusual street performances, as well as joining the experimental music group Grey with famous artist Jean-Michel Basquiat. Grey was one of the many bands he has been part of. After he left it, he formed Bohack and recorded the highly regarded avant-garde industrial noise album, It Took Several Wives. Gallo also expressed himself creatively in the 20th century Art Povera style, which treated found objects as art material. A few years later, Gallo was exhibiting his artwork alongside Basquiat, Kruger, and other artists at the famous Anina Nose Gallery. This background as a painter also served his proficiency in creating films, through his intense focus on composition. The filmmaker attributes many of his perspectives, concepts, and elements later portrayed in his films directly to his experiences with music.
And certainly my artistic or creative sensibilities, I hate to use, creative sensibilities, my aesthetic, my point of view was certainly formed and developed through listening and playing music. So, of course, I did a lot of visual art too, but really my interest, my collecting, my hobbies, everything revolves around music and listening to music.
Gallo's beginnings in the medium of film began when the filmmaker joined the b-boy community, and due to his friendship with New York filmmaker Michael Holman, he starred in the first and only episode of Graffiti Rock.
Cool. Yo, so what's up? What's your name?
Monique. My name's Prince Vince.
Let me ask you something. Who's the freshest DJ MC crew around?
You know who. Psst, come on.
Who?
Jam Master Jay. We're on DMC.
Wow.
Later, New York underground filmmaker Eric Mitchell cast Gallo as a lead in his film, The Way It Is. After being an invited guest in one of his free performances, this was Gallo's first appearance in a feature-length.
Vincent Gallo was in the film too.
Nevertheless, Vincent had already directed several short films before his first feature. The only one still available to watch is his collaboration with Michael Holman in Vincent Gallo's The Flying Christ, which featured in Julian Schnabel's Basquiat.
Frankie thing? You know that Frankie thing? We edited it. Looks pretty good. It's really good. I'm thinking about putting that drum mode on it and make it into like a nice video. You know, like a music video. Press play on the box right there. Press play on the box. Press play on the box.
Take it away, Take it away.
Vincent Gallo went on to star in 67 short films, TV shows, and features according to his IMDb page. Gallo was and is very noticeable and imitable in all of his roles as a screen actor, developing his role as an auteur actor. Gallo significantly plays himself in almost any role, such as the hoggy, comical Paul Leger in The Arizona Dream, the disdainful communist sympathizer Abel Ferrara's The Funeral, or the dejected, lovesick technocrat vampire in Claire Denis' Trouble Every Day. Gallo developed a signature style of helpless sincerity, random aggressivity, fidgety movements, and hypnotic staring, an emphatic pronunciation and repetition of phrases, a fondness for the word nice, and several other characteristics that make him easily imitable.
Hello, my name is Paul Leger. A lot of you may be wondering what Leger means. A lot of you may be wondering what kind of name it is. Is it Italian? Or is it Swedish? Well, actually, it's a French name, and it literally means born to act.
Nevertheless, his distinction as an auteur came when he directed his debut film. This film takes on the journey of Billy Brown, a young adult played by Gallo, who has just been released from jail, for which he served a 5-year prison sentence as a way to avoid a gambling debt to a mobster bookie, which threatens his family with violence. After being released from jail, Brown desperately tries to find a place to urinate, in which he crosses a dance hall and finds his female counterpart throughout the film, Layla, played by Christina Ricci. In a manner to impress his parents, who are oblivious to his incarceration, Brown kidnaps her in order for Layla to play the role of Wendy Balsam, his high school infatuation, whose unrequited love is learned about later in the film. Nevertheless, Layla develops a variety of Stockholm Syndrome, which turns into actual love towards Billy, regardless of his innocent, aggressive nature towards her. The film then develops as Brown faces the trauma accumulated in his life, its majority through his parents, played by Ben Gazzara and Angelica Houston, and the painful memories they cause their son, which are represented through flashbacks. The film depicts the crossroads which Brown must cross to push beyond all of his trauma. Gallo describes the theme and message of his film as,
the concept of the character is that as an adult, it's very simple, as an adult, he decides to no longer be a victim of these experiences that he had as a child and take responsibility for his life, to make positive choices on who he chooses as a friend and positive choices as to how he behaves towards this friend. That's a very simple concept.
That's interesting, because what it is it's about a guy who's kind of infantilized but not having made decisions, and each decision he makes him more of an adult and moves him out of the house he grew up in.
Yes. I mean, it's funny that, you have 5 or 6 moments. I mean, he has these flashback memories to these significant moments in his life, and they've permeated his basic nature and made him this person. He's become this person because of these moments of impact, these specific moments of impact. And there's something very tragic about that. It really upsets me to think that I'm this Vincent Gallo guy because of this brief experience in my life, almost forever. I'm either the person who is very much affected by that, or I'm the person who spends a lot of time recovering from the effects of that, or trying to fight off the effects of that.
But you have an understanding of that in a way clearly Billy does not.
Billy has no clue. No clue. He's just finger pointing. He's resentful. He's angry.
Did you conceive him? Because he's like a child.
Yeah.
And he literally goes home to that, and he wants to try to impress his parents that he's an adult, and they don't even. And that's the thing.
The first thing he does when he gets out of jail is he finds the need, to clear himself with his mother and father, and to again look for this thing that he's never going to get. I mean, he's going for something immediately that he's so obviously never going to get. And when we observe that, we can see that he's never going to get it immediately as soon as we meet the mother and father. And it's so tragic that he still is looking for it there, that he's still looking for love and approval from people who have no clue how to give it or who wants it.
It won't spoil my appetite, Ma. I don't eat chocolate. I'm allergic to it. Remember?
Honey, what are you talking about? You don't eat chocolate. You always ate chocolate.
That's great, Ma. That's great. You don't remember your own son. That's really great.
Ma,
I'm allergic to
my
chocolate.
face is kind of itchy.
My face blows up. All right? You don't remember your own son?
Ooh, honey, what happened to your face? It's all swollen. You better put some ice on that.
I ate chocolate when I was a kid, and you had to take me to the emergency room because my face swelled up?
A lot of directors take years to develop their personal style and aesthetic, but Gallo is distinctively Gallo and already in his first film. As I have mentioned, to be categorized as an auteur in your debut is not unthinkable, as Jim Jarmusch has proved. In terms of being an auteur in his directorial debut, many of the positions placed by the Cahiers du Cinéma authors and Andrew Sarris are accomplished. For example, the first position of the auteur set by Sarris, which is being a good director, is accomplished through many ways. Gallo is very confident in his skills as a technician, or as a good director, as Sarris says.
I would have thought directing and everything else you do in the movies, from scoring and editing, those would be much more difficult because, for instance, being a cinematographer, you have to know framing and lenses and so forth. How did you learn all that? Not going to film school.
You'd be surprised at how little people know who do those jobs and how quickly you can learn what they know and know more than them. I know more about lenses than any cinematographer I've ever met in my life. I know more about taking apart and repairing a camera body than any cinematographer I've ever met in my life. And the reason I do is because I put the time in. I don't learn what is the protocol and then stop there. I continue to learn as much as I can so that I have a full understanding of everything I do. And that's what, you don't really learn in traditional education.
Additionally, Gallo has a clear problem with how directors go about the process of making a film. For example, in an interview with Elvis Mitchell, Gallo explains how directors he has worked with are not going into films prepared with conceptual designs or clear plans for every frame.
I quite often feel that directors that I've worked with have kind of a mixed sensitivity to their continuity, the way they film a scene. They're very, they seem to be making movies in the editing room. That's the feeling that I get on the set when I'm filming. I don't feel there's the kind of subtlety and nuance in a take feel they're frightened by the process of making a film to the point where they're obsessed with covering themselves, with giving themselves options. And I noticed immediately that I had a conceptual premise for each scene in the film. Meaning, when you go on set, my experience was that when I went on set with other directors, a cameraman would look at a room, he would get ideas from the room, he would get ideas from the available light, he would get ideas from his lighting technique, he would get ideas from the rehearsal of blocking a scene, etc., etc. And the director and the cinematographer and the actors would what I felt was convolute the point of view and the aesthetic of the film in these ways. I noticed in storyboarding with the storyboard person that I worked with that I worked best if I had a conceptual premise to how to shoot a scene.
He exemplifies this with the shortcomings of the acclaimed director Emir Kusturica when he worked with him in Arizona Dream.
Kusturica, for a great example. We shot Arizona Dream for 8.5 months. I mean, that is a very convoluted point of view about what film you're going to make. And I know for a fact that when he did Time of the Gypsies, he filmed for 1.5 years, and when he did Underground, he filmed for 1 year. I have a very clear point of view about what film I wanted to make.
Gallo explained his process of designing each shot to contain the subtlety and concept he set out before filming commenced. He referred this especially through his previous work as an artist.
My background was as a painter, as an artist, so composition was very important to me. I obsessed on camera composition. But after I satisfied myself with what I was doing visually in that way, in a compositional way, I wanted the scene, the characters in the scene, and the scene itself to have nuance, real subtlety. I wanted to make the kind of film that got better and better the more you saw it, and got better and better the more you thought about it.
The filmmaker clearly was the only meaning maker for his film. In the case of his main character, Billy Brown, who was played by him, he came off as a very idiosyncratic character, but Gallo had to counter this with de-romanticization of his situation.
I didn't want Billy Brown or the characters in my film to be too unique and special. I wanted to remind everyone that if you pulled back and you looked at them in the big picture, in the setting, in the context that they were really in, that people are rather ordinary. I mean, that it's just a car parked in a street and some people inside the car having a funny discussion, or it's just a person walking across the street. When you film that from far away, you see that the whole world is complex and it's not divided into unique to the extreme individuals. That was very important to me because I feel that the film is so romanticized already. I didn't want to make the characters too unique and special in that way. I wanted to place them in context.
Technically, Gallo, in his first film, distinguishes himself with a lot of experimentation with the medium's capabilities, such as in the first frames of the film as Brown waits coldly on the bus bench outside the penitentiary. Several smaller frames of his life in prison appear and get enlarged. Such as the isolated and alienated way he places the camera to represent the dysfunctionality in which he operates with his mother and father while they sit at the ubiquitously sacred dinner table. Another worthy example is the visual style in which he films a scene where he confronts the Buffalo Bills player in his strip club with the idea to kill him and himself. Gallo not only played with visual style but with its narrative. Gallo said he wanted music to be the film's forefront.
It's a pure musical. That's how it was conceived by me, and that's how it was presented by me. It's a musical, and the musical numbers are significant, and they're traditional musical numbers in a way.
And as such, music plays in some of the film's most iconic scenes, explicitly at the bowling alley where Layla begins to tap dance to Moonchild by King Crimson. In terms of his style and signature, Gallo's style is conspicuously very tied to his own personality, which is standard when it comes to a director writing and directing his own features. Although this is Gallo's directorial debut, his signature can be therefore derived to his extra-textual persona. Gallo's right-wing politics are also very visible through the theme and resolution of Buffalo 66 and the decision Billy Brown eventually makes.
It builds to this point that I mentioned earlier about taking responsibility, because I'm very rigorous in that way politically. You know, I have a real strong concept of which helps me in my own life to try as much as possible not to see adults, especially myself as an adult, ever as a victim. Even if I get struck by lightning, I have to take that as a challenge and just kind of move on.
The childish Billy Brown undergoes a pursuit of personal accountability while tempted in the opposite direction towards feelings of victimization and obsessive self-pity. Billy manages to grow and ultimately find some redemption and companionship. Finally, the last position of interior meaning is extrapolated from the tension between a director's personality and his material. It's a contentious position, as it is not very clear what Sarris meant. Sarris quotes Truffaut as saying that it's the temperature of the director on set. Firstly, in terms of interior meaning, Sarris posits that it's more than the director's worldview or his attitude towards the characters. It would seem to be related to the shock or recognition of the viewer upon noticing the cinematic expression of the auteur's personality. In terms of interior meaning, in Sarris's reflection with Truffaut's quote of the temperature of the director on set, Gallo fills out both boxes. Firstly, Gallo in a roundtable interview with film critics explains a term which can be equivalent to the interior meaning: his valorization of concept when creating a film.
Obvious that the film has a very conceptual aesthetic sensibility. Yeah. It's not, I mean, when you see Tim Robbins' Dead Man Walking, there is an obvious character that he's obsessed with in the film. There's an obvious political point of view that he's obsessed with in making that communist movie. But there isn't an obvious conceptual point of view. There isn't an obvious aesthetic point of view.
Kevin Corrigan, his co-star in the film, explained that he felt that Gallo created the film for a specific moment.
The sequence at the end with the Yes song, you know, where they, you know, points at Scott and that part of the song gets going. I was like, that's probably why he wanted to make this movie, just so he could sync up that moment with that part of that song.
This can be brought back to his influences, precisely the influence of Yasuhiro Ozu.
Autumn afternoon, about a father and his daughter on the day of her wedding, and I don't remember anything else about the movie, except the scene when the father comes home from the wedding reception and comes back into his home, and we see that he's basically sentenced to the rest of his life in a certain kind of solitude. Not much happens, but for that one moment, everything that Ozu did and presented was for that one piece of sensibility, for that one piece of language.
Kevin Corrigan was right in his thinking, although he mixed up the scenes, as it's actually the final moment where Billy Brown buys Layla chocolate milk and a cookie. Billy finds solace in companionship and taking responsibility for his own life.
Okay. And here, this is for you because I don't know why. Just take it. Okay. Thanks a lot. I'll see you guys later. You got your cookie here, all right? Before you leave, take it for your girlfriend, all right? All right. It's all right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
She brings the sunshine.
terms of temperature of the director on set and the tension between the director's personality and his material, as Andrew Sarris notes, Gallo notably did a lot of roles which a normal crew would have. Kevin Corrigan, again, the actor who played Goon, attested to this.
He did my makeup himself. He didn't like what Gucci had done. Gucci, I can't remember her last name. That was her first name, Gucci. She did my makeup, and he says, no, he's got to look. He looks too good here. Give me that stuff. He took her makeup bag, and he goes, do you have any like kind of enamel we can put on his teeth? He's like, we have to make him ugly. He's like, look at him now. He's trying to make all the girls feel sorry for him. I can tell he's been working this technique his whole life. You got to make him mess up his hair, and he just got me. He just put his hands on me and molded me into the shape that he wanted.
Gallo also took the time to get actors into character in peculiar ways, which solidifies himself as an actor's director, albeit an infamous one.
We're in his dressing room. He was doing some weird thing where he was talking over me. I was trying to, kind of analyze the scene and intellectualize, and he just started to, right over whatever I was saying, he was going, Goon, Goon, Goon. And I really started to feel, just very, he was, I feel like, that he and I kind of understood each other in a very primal gut level way, and when he was doing that, it had a strange effect on me. It was very kind of hypnotizing, and
you liked it, yeah.
It was like this is real. This is real actor stuff.
These interactions with the cast and running the set as a director and main actor often found him at odds with the cast and crew.
Houston is miserable?
Oh.
Really?
Oh.
Why is that?
Just spoiled, nasty, selfish, ego. I remember when we were doing Buffalo 66, I needed to change something, the time, 15 minutes, and I asked Ben Gazzara first. I didn't ask Angelica first. Okay, that cost me 600 roses.
Wow.
Christina Ricci, the actress who plays Layla, speaks about his temperature on set in a Conan interview.
Movie, and I was reading the press kit about the movie, and they said that to create this, for the movie, to create this kind of sort of unlikable character at first, he was actually mean to you off camera. Is that right?
Well, yeah, because he sort of was really getting into his character, and it was sort of scary because I didn't know that he was doing this. So we would, and he was really nice before we started actual production, and then once we started production, before takes and stuff, he'd yell at me. Not really yell, but say kind of things like he told me once that he said, oh, look at you, those, like, 2 pimples. And, so he...
Always a way to endear yourself to a woman. I find.
Yeah, but then I realized he was just in character.
Hey, but he should mention that to you.
I know. I guess he thought he wanted my reaction to be sincere, which it was.
Ricci also attested to Gallo's control on the film and the auteur status, which in turn created his temperature on set.
Vincent ended up producing, directing, doing everything himself. So he was very stressed out. And he was also acting. And he's a little bit of a method actor. So to have to do all of that at once, I mean, he was incredibly stressed out.
Kevin Corrigan shared his sentiment.
He ran the set like he was desperate to get it right. He was the only one who knew how the movie looked and how it should be, and he didn't really trust anyone else to like I said, with the makeup, he had to do it himself. When lining up the shots, he was like, no, it's got to be. He would change the lights. He would do.
In terms of viewing this film through an autobiographical lens, the film features Vincent Gallo, starring as his main character, Billy Brown, who was born in Buffalo, such as Gallo, and indulged in criminal webs which lands him in jail after confrontation with a mobster bookie. Gallo himself was very much involved in crime in his youth while still living in Buffalo.
I was very much into criminal things, so I always had 1 or 2 friends in my criminal circle.
Oh yeah? Criminal as in what? Just like petty theft and so forth?
No, big theft, armed robbery, auto theft, real things.
Furthermore, the scenes with the family were shot in Gallo's own home in Buffalo. Not only was the home his actual childhood home, but his parents in the film were heavily molded around his real parents. His father, being a film musician, was translated into Billy Brown's father, and how he takes Layla into his room to sing to her.
Hope I can still get up there.
Fools rush in where angels fear to tread, and so I come to you, my love, my heart above my head.
It is clear that Gallo's first film was a very personal film with a lot of his own personality, perspectives, and aesthetic sensibilities. It is also clear that Gallo established himself as the pinnacle of the auteur in just one film. The film became the #1 independent film for 1998, and it even surprised Vincent Gallo.
You know, to tell you the truth, I was a little surprised because I felt I was making an avant-garde film that would have no audience. I was very surprised that people could relate to it in a very simple, basic way.
On the other hand, there was minimal financial success.
Success from Buffalo 66?
Yeah, certainly the words of people.
Describe to you the reality, okay? Because that's the most asinine thing I've ever heard in my life. I made Buffalo 66 for $1.2 million, of which I took no salary. In Hollywood terms, Buffalo 66 is a flop. Do you understand? It made a couple $1 million domestically, and nobody in America knows or gives a shit who I was.
Okay.
Nobody ever offered me any big job after Buffalo 66. No couple picture deal, et cetera, et cetera. It was extremely hard for me to get financing for my next film, and I never was offered any other directing or acting role. So I don't know what you're talking about, success going to my head. But in Hollywood terms, Buffalo 66 was a flop.
Something he would have to endure for his next and final film, The Brown Bunny.
I wish I never made The Brown Bunny. It ruined my life for the past 3 years. It ruined my body. I'm an out-of-shape, old man. I've lost a lot of my hair. I have gray hairs now. My body looks terrible. I haven't had a date or a relationship with a girl in 4 fucking years. I haven't really made out in a real way with anybody. I lived in a hotel out of a suitcase for 3 years to make the film. My whole life fell apart. So yes, it was nice being in the cinema last night being booed for 2 hours. Yes, it was nice.
I declared The Brown Bunny to be the worst film in the history of the Cannes Film Festival, and so did many other critics, and a loudly booing audience at the press screening.
The Brown Bunny was Gallo's second film and his last remaining directorial feature, available for audiences to view. In an interview with Elvis Mitchell, Gallo remarked a telling statement on his second feature.
It's a bonus. And what do you do with that bonus? Do you go and sign a 3-picture deal with a bigger company? Do you make a film with a bigger budget? Do you make a film with bigger actors? What do you do? What I am going to do is use that success and power, which is not a destructive thing, to make an even more radical, difficult film. So the next film, for sure, I promise you, there won't be a third film.
And after all, Gallo was correct. The film was almost ubiquitously slated by the press, lambasted firstly by the acclaimed critic Roger Ebert in the film's first showing at Cannes.
The film consists of an unendurable 90 minutes of uneventful banality. Imagine long shots through a windshield as it collects bug splats. Imagine not one but 2 scenes in which he stops for gas. Imagine a film so unendurably boring that at one point when he gets out of his van to change his shirt, there's applause.
The film that played at Cannes in May of 2003 was the worst film I had ever seen there.
The film follows Bud Clay, a professional motorcycle racer who heads from New Hampshire to California to race again. Along the way, he meets various women who provide him with a cure to his own loneliness, but only a certain woman from his past will truly satisfy him. But The Brown Bunny has mainly become notorious for its sexually explicit climax, featuring a reportedly unsimulated moment of oral sex between Gallo and his co-star Chloe Sevigny.
Who services you and gives you oral in your film. This film is controversial because there's
real sex.
There's an actress in there named Chloe Sevigny.
She's hot.
Sevigny.
She's a piece of ass, that chick.
She's pretty, yeah.
How's her oral technique? Was it good?
Gallo had already cemented himself as a good director from his debut feature, but in his second film he decided to create a completely different type of movie, all the while keeping a coalescent signature between the two films. the filmmaker takes on a completely new genre, the road movie. Gallo had a very clear concept for this film and did it with minimal crew. Besides writing, directing, and producing, Gallo controlled 90% of the elements being contributed to this film.
When I made this film, I decided, you want to work in my film? First of all, there's only 3 people who work in the fucking film. 3 people. You want to work in my film? You sign a piece of paper that says, if I give you a credit, it's up to me, and what it says is up to me. Otherwise, don't work in my film. You want to act in my movie? You give me your home phone number and I'll talk to you directly. If your agent calls me in any way whatsoever, you're fired from the film.
And again, Gallo had his fair share of grievances when it came to casting the film, famously rejecting the star power of Winona Ryder and Kirsten Dunst, just proving how anal and clear the filmmaker is in the creation of the infrastructure for the film.
That's what happened with Kirsten Dunst. The day before we were about to shoot, suddenly her agent called me, started harassing me a little, so I just said, fuck you. Really?
Mm-hmm. The girl who was supposed to play this girl here originally was going to be Kirsten Dunst, and she's a jerk, and then it was going to be Winona Ryder, and she's a jerk, and then I just found this girl a couple miles away from this gas station in a little small town, and I'm happy that I don't have Spider Girl or Shoplifter in my film.
Gallo states that he handled the camera himself for a majority of the film, such as the shower scene and the final bedroom scene.
In the scenes, like I don't really trust anybody to shoot for me anymore, so I'm always the cameraman, and when I can't actually hold the camera, I have somebody hold it, but I look at a monitor, which is interesting because then I can do sort of radical framing, you know, and I can talk when my face is not on camera. I can tell the operator what to do, you know, photograph my chest, follow the soap, whatever it is. And I can, like I'm looking, see how I sort of moved off frame there. I can see that, so it's like a, you know, cinematographers can never be that in sync with the performer because neither one knows what the other one is doing. But if you're shooting and performing at the same time, it's nice. I like it.
As explained, he does this because of the lack of trust in other people to achieve what he wants to achieve. Furthermore, the entire film uses super 16mm film stock, and with a very specific lighting and experimentation with the lenses. Scenes shot inside the van in the dead of night are so grainy and the focus so soft that the viewer is forced to recognize the shape of Bud's facial features, outlined by the road signs outside the window. It is clear that Gallo knows not only how to work a film set, but all of the technical aspects of shooting the film, something only obtained if the filmmaker has a very distinct concept for every shot and frame in the film. With the second film, a greater sense of symmetry to his first film can be made, and a real sense of personality can be configured from viewing both of the films. Although the film is vastly different from his first, it maintains several signs of his auteur signature, such as the use of long shots with no intercuts, exemplified already in the first shot of the film, which is a 2-minute long-distance tracking shot of Bud Clay riding his bike around a velodrome, while loud waves of motorcycles crash in and out. Gallo himself has said that he creates a new way of doing in every project he makes.
What I do, and I do this as a director and a cinematographer and a photographer and everything I do, I don't have a set technique, and instead I invent a new technique for every job. So
Gallo takes a road less traveled in The Brown Bunny, with relying only on a more simplistic and subtle way of representing the world and the experience of the main character.
I understand the film is very modestly paced and very minimal in the way it articulates story and sensibility, but there's a lot of subtle things going on, a lot of nuance, and quite frankly, I mean, it's a really beautiful song and it's nice photography. I mean, if you can't sit through 3 minutes of beautiful footage out of a window on a rainy night outside of a city, I think we're listening to a nice song without booing. I mean, I don't know.
Majority of the film is seen through the dirty windshield of Clay's van, as he intermittently stops to eat, rest, or kiss and interact with flower-named women. The film lacks all the complex comedy which Buffalo 66 uses, the comedy of unresolved tensions.
For me, please. Why are you pointing that knife at me? Is that why you came here, to stab me with that knife? Huh? Will you turn it away from me, please?
Honey, just...
Turn it away, please!
What? The knife is not pointed at you.
Yes, it pointed at me.
Honey.
Don't tell me you didn't point the knife at me.
I did not point the knife at you.
Don't point a knife at a person unless you want to use it.
I didn't point the knife at you. It was here, on the table like that.
It was not here. Point it over here. Over here.
Honey, just calm down, all right?
I am calm.
She's talking.
You see what he did?
Fine.
You see what your
I didn't
son
do nothing.
did?
I didn't do nothing.
He pointed a knife at his father.
Yeah, I pointed.
What it does not lack is similar casting. Primarily, Vincent Gallo cast himself in the main role of Bud Clay, as he did with Billy Brown in Buffalo 66. All the women in the film are also reminiscent of Layla in Buffalo 66. All 4 women met in the film are complacent in that they let themselves be taken by the main character. Both Rose and Violet, the women met in New Hampshire and Las Vegas, immediately get into Gallo's car after a very short period of conversation. Lily, famously played by former supermodel Cheryl Tiegs, is the melancholic woman sitting by herself at the rest stop, eagerly looking to Clay, as if to speak to her. Furthermore, the presence of Cheryl Tiegs in this scene recalls the pin-up posters that may have once occupied the space of teenage fantasy, but are now the ruins of nostalgia, no longer able to sedate the imagination.
Best kissing of my whole life, honest to God,
right.
Not to beat her up or anything. Cheryl Tiegs was the best makeout of my whole life.
Unresolved tensions maintain themselves in the world of Brown Bunny, as Bud Clay travels across landscapes of Americana in order to return to his home, to reunite himself with Daisy, his wife, who is only revealed in the film's penultimate scene. These are the themes that Gallo embraces with the 2 films, the universal effects and roots of repression, trauma, and the need for validation. The idea of Gallo's characters returning to the familiarity of their homes and hometowns is seen in both films as a route to communicate their loneliness and isolation. It's in these homes and familiarities where the main character's crisis is exposed to them, and where they must make their decision. This decision is linked to Gallo's own personality and politics.
The Republicans are portrayed as a bunch of mainstream white rednecks, religious fanatics, and evil corporate leaders. It's simply not true. I considered myself a radical, always, but an extremely conservative radical.
The main characters' names are consonants, Billy Brown and Bud Clay. Both names are tied to the idea and sensibilities of the color brown. Color, generally assumed to be amongst the least popular of colors, which is in accordance with Gallo's work, a celebration of his contrarian gestures to life. His embracing of unusual cinematic techniques and obscure motives that are wholly incongruous to the mainstream appetites. Gallo spoke on his distinguishing personality and signature in his director's commentary of the film.
My work is the same. The photographs, the paintings, music, everything, interior design, architecture, it's all about aesthetic, sensibility, and metaphor, and it has nothing to do with me personally. This is not a glorification of me. It's the preservation of insight into relationships, characters, personalities, insight into culture, politics, sensibility, relationships. It's about aesthetic. It's things having nothing to do with me. I'm just a custodian. I'm just the idiot who spends his whole miserable life trying to represent these insights. I may have a big ego in thinking that I'm smart enough to know what needs to be preserved, or that I'm smart enough to have these insights, but it has nothing to do with my self-glorification. I only appear in these films not because I feel like I'm so aesthetically pleasing, but I can manipulate the film in a certain way when I'm multitasking, and performing is one of the multitasks. But basically my whole life has been I've been a custodian of these things.
In terms of interior meaning, the film is structured and presented with the effect of blurring numerous perceived lines, delineating various extreme binaries, including life and death, narrative and pornography, reality and fantasy, and radicalism and conservatism. The majority of the film contains long shots of pieces of Americana, through changing weather, states, roads, and landscapes. These are all viewed through the inside of the van, and through its unkempt windows. As Bjorn Gronstad perceives the unmistakable relationship between intricately interlaced ecologies, the desolate external landscape and internal emotional geography of the main protagonist, in which the condition of emotional paralysis that afflicts the characters is etched into their visual surroundings. This emotional paralysis is most visualized in the detour at the Bonneville Salt Flats in northwestern Utah, a truly desolate patch of salt pine desert, with miles of dried mud in all directions. Bud unloads his motorcycle and rides away from the camera, disappearing into its terrestrial symbolism. Gallo himself attests to this, bolstering the claim of the auteur in his hierarchy and meaning-making.
Bike out of the van, that the character would take the bike out of the van and just... because the only thing he can control, this guy, is the bike, and somehow I feel like he's trying to get away from something by just driving the bike off into nowhere. Well, you'll see what happens. It can't be done like that. But he sure does try.
Clay is like the arid exterior of the dried mud. He's the shield around him which incapacitates him from connecting with the flower-associated women he meets. He's masochistic in the sense he will interact with them until becoming reluctant with where it will lead him emotionally, which plays with sporadic, brightly lit flashbacks of Daisy. The only time Daisy is referenced is when Clay briefly visits Daisy's mother and father. The scene plays out with very soft lines of dialogue and silence as Daisy's mother seems confused as to who he is, and that she has not heard from her daughter. The brown bunny, which belonged to Daisy, is caged in the corner of the room. Metaphors can be extracted from this echoed brown bunny in his cage, which ring the same note as Billy Brown's stay and leave in the prison in Buffalo 66. The penultimate scene in the film is where Daisy is revealed, at a California motel where she suddenly appears in Gallo's room, with no indication that she entered the room through any door. The following scene is the infamous scene of unsimulated oral sex. Clay, in a soft, aggressive way, chastises her for being unloyal and promiscuous while she performed fellatio on him. Gallo says this about the nature and orthodoxy of the scene and its unsimulated manner.
The whole purpose of the graphic sex scenes were to enhance the complications of intimacy. Pornography is free, especially if you want it to be, free of guilt, responsibility, consequence, hang-up, insecurity, anger, resentment, fear, la 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 la. In pornography, you're allowed to only enhance sexual pleasure and sexual fantasy. That's what pornography is. To use graphic images that are icons of pornography, but to connect them directly, inseparable from consequence, guilt, responsibility, fear, anger, resentment, privacy, is quite unusual and very powerful, and I thought that they could be used to enhance those things, and that's what they did, but I was still very nervous about what I needed to do to create those graphic images.
The rest of the scene in his brightly lit bedroom has Gallo break down directly after his ejaculation, in what is a true testament of negative feelings which aren't usually associated with the sex or pornography displayed.
I don't understand. Our baby died. I didn't want anything to happen, but it did. What happened? I just barged in, but there was no lock on the door. Why did you tell them to leave? They were standing in front of the door and they just started smoking, and I thought I'd just have a little bit and then leave. And then what happened? And then I passed out, but oh my God. You made me, but you saw them and you left me there. Oh, I saw them with you.
Gallo explains his concept further in a Stern interview.
I was using pornography as things used to enhance sexual pleasure, sexual fantasy. I used icons of pornography and attached them to consequence, guilt, grief, things.
It's without saying that Gallo's personality and material are very interlinked in this film, and much more conceptual and subtle due to his film's minimalism. In terms of the director's temperature on set and his process in creating the film through working with its infrastructure, Gallo again was very meticulous. Notably, as I have mentioned, Gallo fired 2 big actresses for not being up to his standards. For example, the first girl Clay meets is an unknown. Gallo uses this to expand upon the emotions of the scene.
This is the first shot that I shot with this girl. She doesn't really know that we're shooting. She doesn't really know what the film is about. She doesn't know what to expect here, but that works for the scene.
When directing Daisy's parents, Gallo specifically spoke and gave unusual direction or misdirection to both actors to get the desired effect he wanted.
The chick in black is the chick with the red hair's mom, but they play well as a couple, as a man and a wife, which is interesting. And she's ready. If you look at the clock, it says it's 20 to 6, and she eats every day at 5 o'clock, and she was really irritated, really uncomfortable that we were delaying her meal, so a lot of her fidgetiness, which works brilliantly for the film, a lot of that fidgetiness is because she's frustrated that her meal is not on the table, and some strange guys in her kitchen talking to her daughter with a couple machines taking pictures, so she's really crotchety. She ruined, 20 good takes, but I just kept pushing it because the more irritated she was, the more it felt like she was responding to something in the scene.
At last, when it came to directing an actual actress who has a lot of experience, Gallo still made sure that she was briefed on what he exactly envisioned for the scene.
Chloe came in to do these scenes in a more traditional performance mood. She had sort of rehearsed ways of acting, and I sort of really broke it down for about 2 hours, just complained and yelled and got her to let go of whatever preparation she did and just be really in the moment here. And by this scene here now, she's not overacting, or she's not coming with prepared moments or a prepared idea of what the scene should be. She's being really spontaneous, and I mean, we're saying the dialogue, but she's listening to what I'm having to say, and I'm listening to what she's having to say, and she's really telling me what she wants to tell me, and she seems honest.
In conclusion, Gallo really is a director's actor. With careful casting and smart directing with his minimal cast and crew, the film achieved its very clear objectives. The final position of the Auteur analysis is the autobiographical side, and Brown Bunny as Buffalo 66 is not an autobiographical film, it maintains a lot of strands of Gallo's history. As with Billy Brown, elements of Bud Clay suggest a certain synergy with Gallo. Bud Clay races motorcycles professionally, a sport in which Gallo himself had previously been involved.
All those years I was racing motorcycles, I always wished somebody would film me, and then finally.
In the director's commentary, Gallo reminisces the track used in the film, as he's been there many times before in his life.
This is the racetrack that I've raced on more in my life than any other track, although they changed it now. It's a NASCAR track. So it's called New Hampshire International Speedway. It used to be called Loudon.
The neighborhood Clay drives through after leaving Rose is a neighborhood his mother grew up in and where he stayed as a child.
This town is Pittston, Pennsylvania, where my mother, who came from Sicily, grew up in this town. And that's why I used it. I had never really spent time here or anything. That's where my mother's from, but
Additionally, Savigny and Gallo both attested that they had been intimately involved in real life prior to the film production.
Quite frankly, if I put energy into it, I'm sure at some point, I mean, we did date at some point, so I didn't spend 3.5 years making a movie so I could get a blowjob, from Chloe.
Gallo again denies any autobiographical truth to the film. He instead states why he uses these elements.
I just thought that to have the film smell of something cathartic or personal would would at least be interesting to me, would create a mood in at least how I made the film. It has nothing to do with being autobiographical or personal. I'm not personal in my work at all, or really autobiographical, but I can use things that are personal or autobiographical to create mood for me, so it doesn't have to translate that way. What's interesting to translate is the mood that's been given to me is articulated into what I'm doing, but this could have been any town. There's no reason that it's this town other than for my own pleasure and pain.
It is suggested that both Billy Brown and Bud Clay are involved in symbiotic relationships with the filmmaker's off-screen persona. In this instance, off-screen is perhaps a more constructive term than real life, as it might be speculated that Gallo's scathing and harsh outspokenness about critics, collaborators, and mainstream cinema audiences is in fact a performance every bit as meticulously calculated as that of either of these fictional characters. Like Brown and Clay, Gallo presents himself publicly as an alienated loner whose soulful complexity is misunderstood and internalized, inevitably resulting in intense feelings of ostracism and exile. Gallo's authorial intent is clear. By his outspokenness, the audience is aware of what Gallo means and thinks of the elements in his films. He doesn't fit into Barthes' ideas of death of the author.
What's your name?
My name is Billy Brown.
The filmmaker is a strong director with a strong temperature on set. Gallo is very controlling with his vision and perspective he wants the film to portray, possibly catalyzed through his working-class aesthetic and blue-collar filmmaking. He's successful in capturing what he wants to capture. Even under the gun of risky reversal stock, unwilling actors, and crew members, Gallo's politique d'auteur does not line up with the mainstream, which in turn is exactly what Gallo wants. Instead, he makes films without an audience in mind.
I wasn't trying to do anything overt to entertain, but there's a sort of mood that I like, and so I'm entertained.
Gallo's an auteur if there ever was one. Despite the fact of his shortage of films, he accomplishes brilliant avant-garde filmmaking, imbued with his own personal poetics and ideas which can all be extracted from witnessing his extra-textual appearances, all the while maintaining that it's not a glorification himself. Instead,
basically my whole life has been I've been a custodian of these things. I mean, like, I'm the guy who polishes the brass railing in front of a nice building, and I take it so fucking seriously. Like, God forbid the brass railing should have a tarnish on it, because somehow it would reflect poorly on the world, and I would be blamed for this poor reflection on the world.
In conclusion, Gallo's clearly an auteur, and most of the time at great cost to himself. This final statement defines him the best.
It's almost like, God said, okay, you get to pick the colors of every house on one street. The only thing is you gotta strip them all down and you gotta hand paint them yourself. Oh, and by the way, you gotta do it with a brush, a tiny little paintbrush. And I get in my mind this idea of how beautiful it would look and which color every house should be, and I go up and down the block on my bike, and I decide how every house should be, and I have a vision of how it would look, this greatest block, and then I sit there like an idiot for 20 years scraping them all down, getting them ready for paint, and then another 20 years painting them with a little brush, and then I'm 80 years old and I'm dead, and then as soon as I die, somebody repaints them another color. So it's like, what the fuck am I doing?